Now let me revert to the question of the non-use of force and the legal regulation of that. There has now been a period of peace and security during which peace and security has been sought by the United States through military power, and international legal rules have been shown some disdain, including the UN Charter. And both attitudes are evidenced in two quotes that I give you from the U.S. National Defense Strategy of 2005. I quote, "The end of the Cold War and our capacity to influence global events open the prospects for a new and peaceful system of the world, in the world." The end of the Cold War and our capacity to influence global events open the prospects for a new and peaceful system in the world. And further, our strength as a nation will continue to be challenged by those who employ a strategy of the weak, using international fora, judicial processes, and terrorism. So one has the impression that the UN processes and judicial processes are the strategy of the weak, opposing the good will to establish a peaceful system in the world. Now, these attitudes are seen even more clearly in direct or indirect renunciations of the central use of force restrictions in the UN Charter, the treaty which the distinguished American lawyer and Secretary of State Dean Acheson called the greatest act of international legislation. And I note one from the U.S. document. The U.S. National Security Strategy, which was published in September 2002, stated flatly that a limitation of the right unilaterally to use armed force in self-defense to cases where armed attacks were occurring, this was the language of the UN Charter, or were imminent, would be insufficient in the era of missiles and terrorists. There's no reference to the Charter, but the indication was that it was the Charter provisions about right to self-defense that was rejected in this national security strategy, and implicitly an arrogation, a demand for a right for preemptive strikes, preemptive war, or preemptive war. This was 2002, just the year before the Iraq invasion. Now let me end by asking how worrisome is it that this Article 51 of the UN Charter, which was to be the one of the two exceptions from the ban on the use of force, how worrisome is it that it has been and may still be renounced by the militarily most powerful government in the world? It might perhaps be said that restrictions on the use of force in the UN Charter are only some 60 years old, and that for much of that period the Cold War placed them in deep freeze. However, the Cold War is over. The UN is not now paralyzed. The Security Council is not paralyzed. They have recently adopted a resolution both regarding Iran and earlier in the year about North Korea. And the world's governments do not endorse this renunciation of the UN Charter that has occurred. It is now, post the Iraq War and post the Lebanon War, clear that the reliance on military force and ignoring the UN rules and support has proved very costly in terms of lives, resources, legitimacy, and leadership. And I would end with the question, can we dare to hope that our US lawyer colleagues will seek a return to the world law that was advocated in the past and to the new world order that President Bush the Elder hailed in 1991?